Coastal Carolina's last stand. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, again, special thanks to everybody who's continuing to subscribe. 10 more subscriptions. We're up to 715. So, again, not quite the 1,000. Well, we weren't hoping for 1,000. We're hoping for 1,000 by Halloween. All right, so more than the 100 that we had been getting, but not quite the 200. But it's still going to be a good month, like 130 subscribers. So thank you so much. And the audio podcast continue to grow. We had another big day. Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, but that's usually the two that are those most popular. And please rate and review if you're in Apple Podcast. Feels like whenever I put like Sunbelt in the title, it seems to do a little bit better. Maybe it gets caught up in the YouTube algorithm. I don't know. But I thought yesterday was a good episode. We're going to preview these games a little bit more in depth today. Couple of them, at least 3 of them. And then we'll do more for the Friday show as well. But I kind of feel like this is going to be the passing of the torch. The torch has already kind of been passed, right? JMU took the division last year. I don't think Jase Medical played in that ball game. I mean, JMU kind of handled them pretty handily. And I think Georgia Southern is, this is a big spot for Coastal Carolina. I mean, I think this is where they're going to end up taking a step back. They lost last week against Georgia State at home. Again, one of those weird deals where the home team doesn't win. That doesn't happen very often. It's a big deal, right? I mean, they don't play a whole lot of Power 5 games at home. I understand that, but Alabama hadn't lost an out-of-conference game at home since ULM in 2007. So again, I know they usually don't play teams that are even with them. So it's a thing. And it just tells you how long it takes to win at home. And now Georgia Southern is going to be at home. They're going to take on Coastal Carolina. Georgia Southern has done a great job marketing the game, trying to make sure there's a packed house. The Clay Helton, the AD, I think the president of the school have all done social media posts. They want to make sure they got a good crowd for the game. I'm not sure why that would be an issue. You would think that, if as long as it's nice weather, and it looks like it's going to be in Statesboro, they would have a big crowd. Whether it's sold out or not is another story. Give it up to, again, Davis Brin. All right. He had a historically bad football game against Wisconsin. I don't know if I said they could have won that football game or they should have won the football game, but, it was a could have, right? It was 14-7 mid-third quarter, and they managed to lose 35-14. That's a neat trick. All right. And Wisconsin wasn't doing anything in that ball game. And it feels like the team, did a good job of moving on from that. I know Ball State is not, the highest level of competition. And last year when Georgia Southern lost to South Alabama, they ended up playing the Cajuns. The Cajuns weren't all that great last year. And Georgia Southern looked like they didn't want any part of that football game. And I think they lost the next game as well before they snapped out of it later on in the season, especially against App State. So, give it up to, Georgia Southern for putting the Wisconsin game behind them. I mean, it's one of those things where, it takes a long time to learn, but you can't do anything about it. So you got to move on and play the next one. And with a 40-6 ball game over Ball State, maybe even 40-3. Now that I think about it, it was 40-3. So good job by Georgia Southern. We'll see what Jase Medical and company can do. Obviously, he's still a dangerous quarterback. They didn't play particularly well against Georgia State in that ball game. They were behind from the get-go. They did put up, 400 yards, averaging 7 yards a pass. Rushing was only about 100 yards on the ground, still averaging more than 4 yards a carry. They did have a bunch of penalties, and surprisingly, Coastal Carolina did not turn the ball over. Tough to have 400 yards total, almost 300 in the air, 100 on the ground, no turnovers, and you lose the ball game. And you won the time of possession. So it's still a 30-17 ball game, and it just never felt like after Coastal fell behind that this was going to be a problem in that ball game for Georgia State, right? I mean, they fell behind 17-3 at the end of the first half. They got as close as 20-10 and 27-17. They were really never in this football game. Georgia Southern could move to 4-1 with a win. Or no, I'm sorry. Do I got that right? Yeah, with a win over Coastal, and is that 1-0 in the conference? This is their first game. So obviously Coastal played last week against Georgia State. Now they're taking on Georgia Southern, and Georgia Southern has an absolute shot of taking down Coastal Carolina. They're the cocky Chanticleers, and everyone in the East is going to like taking them while they're down a little bit. I think Tim Beck is going to be okay later on down the road, but I don't think his system fits the players that he has just yet. We know what was good for Grayson McCall with that, triple option, whatever they were doing type of deal, RPO, really hard to defend, and it's not nearly as hard to defend now. That doesn't mean Grayson McCall's still not a really good quarterback. It doesn't mean that they don't have weapons, right? Georgia Southern can't just walk in there and say they're going to win because Coastal Carolina may be down a little bit. I don't think that's the case either. You got to, finish them off. I think Georgia Southern will do it. It is a high spread, isn't it? It's a 6.5-point spread. That's a lot. That'd be one of those games where I think that's going to happen, but I'm not really sure. I think that means Georgia Southern's got to win by a touchdown. I mean, I think they can. I'm just not super confident to put my money on that. I guess if I was putting money down, that's one I would stay away from. I don't know how this game is going to go. I think Georgia Southern's going to win, but not enough to where I think they're going to win by 7. I'm just not that confident. It just seems like a lot of points. But again, Georgia Southern seems to be a good football team this year. Coastal Carolina seems to be an average football team this year. That's the way I would take it. All right. Let's take a timeout. All right. When we come back, let's talk about, South Alabama heading to JMU. It's going to be strength versus strength. And maybe the Dukes on top. All right. Let's talk a little bit about FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Quickly going back to that, so you can cash out of these games if you think you're going to win. You may not win everything, but you could win 85, 90, almost 95% of what you're betting. And yeah, that happened to me. Should have done it last week. Should have done it with I should have done it with a Georgia Southern Wisconsin ball game. That's what the game I should have done it with a couple weeks ago. But Syracuse was going to cover. Got an interception, 4 minutes to go on the goal line. Doesn't get a first down. Army, which has probably never had an 80-yard touchdown pass in the history of Army football, throws an 80-yard touchdown pass. There goes my bet. I don't know why I'm laughing. I should be crying. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. This was going to be a much bigger ball game. when the schedule came out, and a couple of weeks ago, they moved it to ESPNU. It is James Madison hosting South Alabama. Could have, championship preview on there. This one, I'm a little bit surprised. It's down to 3. This was like 5.5 JMU. JMU is only favored by 3 in this ballgame. I guess maybe the thing is JMU has had 3 really close ball games. They've won those 3 ball games. They're 4-0. South Alabama comes in 2-2. They've beaten Virginia. They had to come from ahead to win that one. I think they fell behind Troy, but eventually took a 2-score lead and hung on to win that one by 2. And they led a big lead against Utah State. They were up 24-0 against Blake Anderson's Aggies and saw that game tied, although they did win it late. The thing is, the stats between these two teams are it's South Alabama's rushing offense, which is 180 yards a game, against JMU's rushing defense, which is 42 yards a game, and that's rounding up. It's going to be interesting. Can LaDainian Webb and company, do a number on JMU and get them to, can they run the football? You got LaDainian Webb, Kentrell Bullock, Marco Lee. Those are your 3 big ones. PJ Martin's got a little bit of time. Braylon McReynolds is banged up. He's out for the season. So you got 3 guys. All right. LaDainian Webb's the main back. Kentrell Bullock is the changeup, if you will. And Marco Lee is the power back. They're all averaging, by the way, over 5 yards or more a carry. Marco Lee is at 5. Kentrell Bullock is at 5.2. And LaDainian Webb is at 6.5. They are a really good rushing team. In 4 games, Webb's got 6 rushing touchdowns, and he didn't play very much in the first 2 ball games of the season. This is the big one. This is basically, talk about last stand. I'm thinking about as a program, Coastal Carolina is going to take a dip. This is the last one for this South Alabama's team. I mean, this is it. They do go to Monroe, then they get Southern Miss and the Cajuns at home. They're at Troy. It's going to be a bummer of a season for South Alabama. They'll try to salvage it, but this is the major competition. It is, a great matchup. A great matchup with a team that rushes, for 180 yards against a team that doesn't give up 50 yards on the ground. Quickly, let's go through that. Let's just see, I did the wrong one. Let's see what the numbers are just for the heck of it. All right. Bucknell probably didn't rush for too much. 62 yards. All right. That's Bucknell. They were behind all game 17-3. All right. At half. All right. Virginia. They rushed for. Now, Virginia had 395 yards. 377 were in the air. They rushed 18 times. 18 rushing yards. They rushed 35 times for 18 rushing yards. I'm not sure if that includes, it does include sacks go down as rushing yards in college compared to the pros. So Troy, let's see what they did. They rushed for minus 12. That probably is sacks. So right now, Bucknell has the most yards against James Madison's rush defense. And Utah State, which put up 500 yards of offense, they came up with 98. They still rushed it 31 times for 98 yards. They still only averaged 3.2. The Jaguars are going to have to rush the football. Now, do you go do the opposite a little bit? Does Kane Wommack go in there and say, we need to run the football, but we're going to open it with Carter Bradley. Do you do the opposite? We're going to pass it to run instead of run to pass. We'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see on how they do this, because that's going to be JMU's game plan to stop the run, and then you come after Bradley. If you start off with the pass, that may loosen things up for the run. We shall see. It could be a great ball game. I have no reason to believe South Alabama can win this ball game. I may not even believe it's going to be all that close, because they just haven't looked like they just have not looked the way they should. This was supposed to be the year for South Alabama football, and it hasn't been close to that. Their biggest win is against a really bad Oklahoma State team. Just a really down year for the Cowboys. All right, let's take one more timeout. We will go over Georgia State and Troy when we come back. It is Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Again, special thanks to everybody to have the channel continue to grow. We feel like we're getting into a groove. Again, 715 subscribers on YouTube. Please continue to do it on the audio downloads as well. Pass it along. I had commenters tell me get on the message boards. We're doing it on Facebook groups. I could find the message boards and try to do that. So that's an idea. Marshall fan was so thankful that I was talking about the herd, and we'll do more if we haven't gotten into it. Yesterday's episode was kind of a quick preview. Now we're doing, 3 of the bigger ball games this weekend, and just thank you so much. And so we're trying to get the word out of the podcast. So I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. It continues to grow, and it's a lot of fun watching the numbers take off. And some days, we don't do a podcast like on the weekend, and then the numbers take off in the middle of NFL football. So something catches on. Again, seems to be when you put Sunbelt in the title, it catches on. So thanks again. Again, if you are doing it on the audio podcast, Apple Podcast, or Spotify, please rate and review, especially on Apple Podcast. It is a big help. That's how other people find this type of stuff. Is basically how it is. It grows because it kind of grows organically because people are liking it, sharing it, rating, and reviewing it. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Another great ball game. Georgia State had the big win against Coastal Carolina last week. We already alluded to that one. They get Troy this week. Then they get Marshall in 2 weeks. So they get a week off coming up. They get Troy this week. And just like South Alabama, because Troy has slipped up a little bit this year, they're 2-2. They are coming off a nice win against Western Kentucky. That's for sure. Gunnar Watson, like 350 yards. Gunnar, I didn't think you had it in you, but congratulations. That's a great ball game by you. He's going up against Aaron Granger. Let's see if he's still rated number 1, right? Because that was like last Thursday. I'm not sure if he's still number 1 in the Sun Belt. He was the number 1 efficiency passer in the Sun Belt, and I think he didn't have a great ball game, for lack of a better term. He did not have a great game against Coastal Carolina. Let's see here. Pass efficiency. He had a good game. It just wasn't a all-world, all-time great game, right? He didn't play poorly or anything like that, and he played above average. It just wasn't what he was doing thus far this season. Did I miss it? Did I keep on stats and the leaders, first downs? It looks like this is all the team stuff first. Oh, here we go. All right, total offense. So again, I think Bryn Davis was ahead of Granger, or maybe Granger fell behind him because he didn't throw for that much against Coastal Carolina, like only 195 yards. So he's right below Bryn Davis by not by about, 9 yards, less than 9 yards, as it turns out. All right, let's see here. Passing average a game, Bryn Davis is, that's what they're going to do. And, Georgia State's going to try and run it a little bit. Granger's fallen to 5th in that. Only averages about 250 yards a game. But, second is TJ Finley, and he's averaging 263. So that's not even, that's like 15 more yards between 2 and 5. Bryn Davis leads the conference with 322 yards. Passing efficiency, though, TJ Finley has taken it over. However, they figure it out. It's just a 1-point edge. which is a little bit strange because he's got one interception. Darren does not have an interception. He's thrown a few more passes. He's got one more touchdown and a little bit more yardage, but not a whole lot. So you would think the efficiency would go towards Granger, but it doesn't. It's going to be a really good ball game. And again, it's going to be, can Georgia State operate with the defense? Also, can Troy's offense operate with Georgia State's defense? Offensively, Georgia State's averaging 440 a ball game. Troy 417. Yards passing is in favor of Troy, and Georgia State rushes for almost 200 yards a game. Troy's defense, though, only gives up 300 yards. Georgia State is 400. That's probably skewed because they gave up a lot of yards to Rhode Island to begin the season. And Troy, again, just like the South Alabama JMU game, Troy, not quite as good as JMU, gives up 88 yards a game on the ground, whereas Georgia State is rushing for 191 yards on the ground. So, again, you have that. Also, Georgia State's rush defense is just as good as Troy's, so it'll be interesting to see. It's a great matchup. It's unfortunately being just streamed on ESPN Plus, I guess. Georgia State, depending on what happens with that JMU South Alabama game, can take control of the East a little bit. They have a conference win. Marshall does not, right? They're only 3-0. They've already been off a week. Georgia State can head into the off week with a perfect record and 2-0 in the conference. All right. See, this ball game, it's tough. This is one of those games. I think Georgia State's going to win. Of course, I thought I got away with one last week. I thought Western Kentucky was going to win and run away with it, but I got the hook. So I got the Troy win, but the Western Kentucky covered. Georgia State's -1. I think Georgia State's going to win this football game at home. They're really good. Troy, you don't want to say they got lucky. Chris Lewis had a couple of big-time catches. One was a Hail Mary. Really good catch. Leaped up and caught it. It was not like it was a, tip pass or anything like that. But can you do that again? So they got a little bit fortunate. Chris Lewis having, just only got 12 receptions, 2 of them touchdowns, and one of them was last week. So maybe he's coming into his own. You got a couple of really good running backs. Vidal and Carroll are into it. And, one's got 514 yards. One's got 508 yards, though Carroll has 8 touchdowns to Vidal's just 2. So it should be a great ball game. And looking forward to watching that. The benefit of the Cajuns, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow, Cajuns are playing early. So instead of the Cajuns playing at 6 p.m. or later and getting out at midnight, now plays at 11, game's over at 2:30. Post-game show is over at 3:30, and I get to do the post-game rage on 103.3 The GOAT, the call-in show, and talk about it. Then we're done at 4 o'clock. Hopefully we're done earlier than that, but, we get to enjoy an evening of college football, so we'll be able to get to watch some Sunbelt games later on in the day. All right, again, thanks again for everyone who is subscribing. Please tell your Sunbelt friends and family who enjoy good discussions on Sunbelt. Really do appreciate it. Keep those subscriptions coming. Don't forget about the audio downloads at Apple Podcast and Spotify as well. Once again, I'm your host, Dave Schultz, and you've been watching and listening to Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day.